What if I told you that the way you get your driver's license in Australia is about to change completely, and millions of drivers have absolutely no idea it's coming? We're talking about stricter tests, harder requirements, longer waiting periods, and a system that's going to make it significantly more difficult to get behind the wheel legally. Now, before you click away thinking this doesn't affect you, stay with me, because whether you're a learner driver, a P-plater, or even a fully licensed driver, what's happening right now in the Australian road safety space is going to touch your life in ways most people haven't thought about. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's changing, why it's changing, and what you need to do right now to stay ahead of it. Welcome back to AU Driving Insider. Let's get into it. Let me start with a number that stopped me in my tracks when I first saw it. Over 1,200 people die on Australian roads every single year. That's not a statistic from the 1980s. That's happening right now in modern Australia with modern cars, modern roads, and modern technology. And when researchers and road safety authorities started digging deep into why that number refuses to come down, they found something uncomfortable. The problem isn't just the roads. It isn't just the cars. A significant part of the problem is how we're training and testing drivers in the first place. And that realization, that the license system itself may be producing underprepared drivers, is exactly what's triggered this massive shift toward tougher testing and stricter licensing across the country. Now here's what most people don't understand about the current system. Getting a driver's license in Australia, depending on which state you're in, can feel surprisingly straightforward. You log your hours. You sit a practical test that lasts maybe 15 to 30 minutes. And if you don't make any major errors, you're handed a piece of plastic and told to go drive on the same roads as trucks, motorcycles, and vehicles doing 110 kilometers an hour. The examiner doesn't see how you handle merging onto a freeway in heavy rain. They don't see how you react when a child runs out from between parked cars. They don't see how you manage fatigue, distraction, or genuine high-pressure situations. They see a short, controlled snapshot. And for decades, that snapshot has been considered enough. But the data tells a different story. Young drivers between the ages of 17 and 25 are massively overrepresented in crash statistics. Newly licensed drivers, people who just got their full license, are involved in serious accidents at rates that should alarm all of us. And when you interview these drivers after the fact, again and again you hear the same thing. I didn't know what to do. Nobody taught me this. The test never covered this. That gap between what the license system tests and what real driving actually demands, that gap is costing lives. And the authorities have decided they've had enough. So what does tougher testing actually look like? Let's break this down properly, because this is where it gets really important. The changes being discussed and rolled out across different states are not minor tweaks. They are fundamental restructures of how the entire graduated licensing system works. First, you're going to see a significant expansion of what practical tests actually assess. The old model of driving around a suburb for 20 minutes is being replaced with scenarios that more closely mirror real-world driving. That means assessments that include higher-speed roads, complex intersections, night driving evaluation, and in some cases, simulation-based components that put you in situations that would be too dangerous to recreate in a real car. The whole philosophy is shifting from, can this person follow the rules on a quiet street, to can this person actually handle what's out there? Second, and this one is huge, the logbook hours requirements are being re-examined. In most states, learner drivers currently need to complete 120 hours of supervised driving before they can sit their test. That sounds like a lot. But here's the problem. Not all hours are equal. 120 hours of driving on the same 3 familiar routes, always during daylight, always in good weather, always with a calm parent beside you. That's not the same as 120 hours of genuinely varied, challenging, progressively difficult driving experience. The new approach being pushed is not just about the quantity of hours, but the quality and diversity of those hours. Learners may be required to demonstrate specific competencies, like motorway driving, wet weather driving, and night driving, before they can progress. Think of it less like clocking hours and more like passing levels in a game where each level genuinely tests a different skill. Stay with me here, because there's something coming up in this video that I think is going to genuinely surprise you. And it's about how these changes might actually affect people who are already fully licensed. Most people assume that once you have your license, you're untouched by licensing reforms. But that assumption is about to be challenged. Third change on the way. The provisional license periods, your P-plates, are also under the microscope. Some states are already extending the time drivers must spend on P1 and P2 licenses before accessing full license privileges. The reasoning is straightforward. The crash risk for newly licensed young drivers is highest in the first year or two after getting their license. Keeping people in a graduated system longer, with restrictions on passengers, speeds, and phone use, saves lives. Full stop. What's being considered in some jurisdictions is extending the provisional phase and adding reassessment checkpoints, essentially asking drivers to prove they've maintained and improve their skills before they move up. Now let me talk about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough, the coaching and instruction side of this equation. Because even if you change the test, even if you extend the logbook, even if you add more restrictions, if the quality of driving instruction doesn't improve, you're only solving half the problem. And the regulatory bodies know this. So alongside changes to learner and provisional systems, there is serious movement toward raising the standards for driving instructors themselves. Stricter accreditation, mandatory ongoing professional development, standardized teaching frameworks. The people teaching the next generation of drivers are going to be held to a much higher bar. And honestly, as someone who follows this space closely here at AU Driving Insider, I think this is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle. A great instructor can build the kind of confident, hazard-aware driver that no test alone can create. Let me give you a real scenario to make this concrete. Imagine two learner drivers. Both log 120 hours. Both passed their practical test. Driver 1 did most of their hours on familiar suburban streets, mostly in the daytime, with a parent who was fairly relaxed and didn't push them into difficult situations. Driver 2 had a structured program that included motorway driving, wet weather sessions, night driving, and deliberate hazard perception training. Both have exactly the same license, but their actual capability behind the wheel is worlds apart. The new system wants to close that gap, not by making people drive more hours, but by making those hours count more. And that is a fundamentally smarter approach to road safety than what we've had before. Now let's get to the part one promised you earlier, because this affects people who are already fully licensed, and most people don't see this coming. As part of this broader safety overhaul, there is increasing pressure on authorities to address the competency of existing license holders, particularly older drivers and drivers who've accumulated traffic offenses. Several states are already moving toward compulsory medical assessments and driving reevaluations for older license holders above certain age thresholds. But beyond age, there's a growing push for what's called a fitness to drive framework that can apply to any license holder whose competency comes into question through a pattern of dangerous behavior on the roads. This is new territory in Australian road law, and it signals a philosophical shift from a system where a license once granted is yours until you do something to lose it, toward a system where ongoing competency is an expectation, not an assumption. I want to pause here for a second and address something that I know is going through a lot of people's minds right now. Some of you are thinking, is this all too much? Is the system becoming too restrictive? Are we making it too hard for people to drive when driving is a genuine necessity for millions of Australians who live outside of major cities? And that is a legitimate concern that deserves a real answer. Public transport in regional Australia ranges from limited to non-existent. Driving isn't a lifestyle choice for many people. It's how they get to work, get their kids to school, access healthcare. Any tightening of the licensing system has to be implemented in a way that doesn't create an impossible barrier for people who genuinely need to drive. And to their credit, the authorities developing these frameworks are aware of this tension. The goal is not to make it harder to drive. It's to make it harder to drive badly. There's a real and important difference. What does this mean for you if you're a learner driver right now? Honestly, it means you should start thinking about your preparation differently. Don't just think about clocking your 120 hours and sitting the test. Think about genuinely developing skill. Seek out diverse driving conditions. Ask your supervising driver to take you onto motorways, to drive at night, to practice in rain. If you can afford a professional instructor, find one who teaches beyond just test preparation, one who teaches you to actually handle real situations. The test is getting harder. But more importantly, the road is already hard. The test is just finally starting to reflect that. What does this mean for P-platers? It means don't be in a rush to lose the P-plates if you're not genuinely ready. I know there's massive social pressure to get your full license as fast as possible. Nobody wants to be told they have restrictions on how fast they can go and how many passengers they can carry. But those restrictions exist for a reason that's written in crash statistics, not red tape. Use the provisional period to actually build your confidence and skill. Because the drivers who use that time well are statistically far safer once they get their full license than those who rushed through it. And for experienced drivers watching this, the message is to stay engaged with this conversation. Because the way the road safety system evolves affects everyone who uses the roads. Safer new drivers means safer roads for everyone. And if you've got teenagers at home who are approaching driving age, the best thing you can do is start having genuine, open conversations about driving as a skill, not just as a rite of passage or a freedom milestone, but as something that takes real investment and real responsibility to do properly. Here at AU Driving Insider, we've been covering the Australian driving and licensing space for a long time. And I want to say clearly, these changes, while challenging for some people to navigate, are fundamentally the right direction. The countries and regions that have implemented evidence-based graduated licensing reform, places like New Zealand, Sweden, and parts of Canada, have seen meaningful reductions in young driver fatalities. This isn't theoretical. This works. The question is how well Australia implements it, how fairly it's applied, and how much support is given to learners and their families to actually meet the new expectations. The road ahead for Australia's licensing system is genuinely changing, and the most important thing you can take from this video is that preparation is everything. Whether you're still on your L plates, you're navigating the P plate years, or you're a parent trying to guide a young driver, the information you have access to right now, before these changes fully land, gives you a real advantage. Use it. If this video gave you something useful, a new perspective, a piece of information you didn't have before, a reason to think differently about driver training, then do me a favor and hit the like button because it genuinely helps this channel reach the people who need this information most. If you've got a question about how these changes might affect your specific situation, your state, your age, your circumstances, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'll do my best to answer or cover it in a future video. And if you're not already subscribed to AU Driving Insider, now is the time to do it, because this story is only going to develop further, and we're going to be covering every update as it happens. Stay safe out there, drive smart, and I'll see you in the next one.